Saludos, de este lado Marielis Acevedo Irizarry, editora de política en el Diario y encargada de la cobertura sobre los asuntos de Puerto Rico en el periódico. Gracias por estar conectados, gracias por seguir las incidencias del diario en nuestras páginas. Today I have a very important guest to discuss an issue that affects the Puerto Rican people. Every single day, we're talking about the electric crisis, the blackouts, and of course, the debate about renewable energy in the island. On the other side of the screen, I have Jennifer Granholm. Jennifer Granholm is the ex-secretary of the DOE, Department of Energy, under the Biden administration. Granholm, thank you very much for accepting this interview. Thank you very much for being here for us and available to answer the question that matters to Puerto Ricans in the island and also to the Puerto Ricans in the diaspora. Hello.
Hello, thank you so much for covering this super important issue.
Okay. Why I have invited the ex-secretary? Because she played a very important, essential role implementing what is called the Puerto Rico Energy Resilience Fund that was approved by Congress in 2022 to provide low-income Puerto Rican families with solar panels or rooftop solar panels. It was meant for houses, but also for community facilities, public facilities. Under the Trump administration, most of the funding has been canceled in the past few months regarding these programs under the fund. Can you explain to the people that is watching this video why in an island like Puerto Rico, exposed to continuous hurricanes and other natural disasters, it's so important that the residents have access to solar energy?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the goal of the island, as you know, through law, is to have 100% renewables by 2050. And as you know, LUMA, who obviously operates the grid, has not been successful in repairing the grid. And the FEMA money that was available was for the grid. So when the late Congressman Raul Grijalva, which we are so grateful for, went to Congress and got $1 billion for rooftop solar and really targeted toward the most vulnerable, it gave people the sense that, wow, maybe when the lights go out, my medical device won't go off. I'll still be able to have access to important ways to communicate. It was so revolutionary to be able to target vulnerable people and allow for them to be able to have the security of knowing that the power won't go out. So, and honestly, so much of this was more about resilience and ensuring that people have access to power, even more than climate change. It was about making sure people are safe. And so the importance of this cannot be overstated, and the dismantling of it is just, first of all, I'm not sure whether there'll be lawsuits because the law was clear about
some
what this
organizations
money
are saying that they
Yeah.
are open to lawsuits, but I don't know if
Yeah.
you have any new information regarding that issue in particular.
I don't have any new information, but I can tell you the law was clear about what this money was intended for. It was not intended, it was intended to be complementary to the grid. Obviously, the grid has to be repaired. We know that. And there's $10 billion to be able to do that. But this money was not to be diverted to the grid. This was for the people. And we had, by the time it was canceled, there were 7,000 homes had received rooftop solar and storage. It was always solar plus battery storage. And there were 12,000 more who either where installations had begun, they were signed up, they were approved, and all of theirs was canceled. The goal was to get 30,000 homes covered. That's not everybody, but that's what $1 billion could have covered. And it's just really
When the
disappointing.
When the Congress approved the Appropriation Act, ¿verdad? To assign the $1 billion for Puerto Rico through the Energy Fund, what was the main concern between the legislators in terms of the electric crisis in Puerto Rico at that moment?
Well, everybody knew, of course, this was after Fiona and, of course, after Maria. Everybody knew that LUMA just took too long, and there were people who were where it was a matter of life and death, where they did not have access to power, and they were on ventilators, or they had medicine that had to be refrigerated, et cetera. So the notion was, while the grid is being worked on, let's target the most vulnerable people so that we don't have another Maria. We don't have another, people dying because of not having access to power. And that's what this was about. Originally, I think the request was for billions more than what was actually appropriated. But nonetheless, they got $1 billion. And that allowed for us to launch these programs. And the way, can I continue on this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm so proud of how we did this. I'm just so deeply frustrated by its unraveling. But how we did this was we had 10 town halls across the island, and we got community feedback about how they wanted this program to be orchestrated, how they wanted it to be set up. And it was the people of Puerto Rico that said, first, make sure that and this is how we define vulnerable: those who have medical conditions where they need access to electricity, those who are seniors and fragile, those who are super poor, and especially those in last mile communities, like in the mountains, et cetera, so that's how we designed the program. And we enlisted solar ambassadors, which were community leaders, to sign people up in their communities because they knew best who was most fragile. And so it was designed to be really a bottom-up strategy, devised and implemented by Puerto Rico, through Puerto Ricans.
What you're saying is that the participation of the community was very important in the process as well.
100%. It would not have been effective without the deep community engagement that we undertook. And we undertook that community engagement, and we also brought in the national laboratories to do a PR-100, meaning getting to 100% clean electricity by 2050, a whole study about how it could be done, where the best places were to go, who were the last mile communities, who were first to lose power and last to get it on after the hurricanes, et cetera. So we did a whole map of that using the labs, and then it was informed by the people. And that whole website, PR-100, that's even been taken down.
We're going to talk in a little bit about PR-100 because I think it's very important as well. But another angle that I think is very important in this conversation is that at that moment, Jennifer Gonzalez, which was the resident commissioner of Puerto Rico in Washington, now is the governor of Puerto Rico, supported that money for Puerto Rico, supported the bill, the Appropriations Act. But after the cancellation of the funding by the Trump administration, her argument was or is that there's nothing left to do regarding this issue. What do you think about her change of position or opinion about this topic?
Well, my guess is because she was supportive about it and was an advocate for it. So my guess is that she has felt pressure from the Trump administration, like so many others, to abide by the Trump administration's wishes. It's very unfortunate.
Tell me a little bit more about the cancellation and the effect on the people are supposed to be the beneficiaries of this. Can you provide a specific example of how the changes are affecting the Puerto Rican people and the people that are supposed to be benefit from these programs?
When I visited a lot of homes when I was there, and to be able to tell the story and use the people who would be best impacted. And I remember this one home that we visited, and the son had cerebral palsy and he was on a ventilator. And, this was a very poor family and they had nothing, but they were going to get this that allowed for them to be secure. It was like, and the mother was crying. She was so grateful that she did at least this one thing, that she could be assured that her son would not die if there's another power outage. And so she's one story of millions, there's hundreds of thousands of people who could feel this. But honestly, that to me was such an impactful visit because it really demonstrated the impact of trying to save lives through solar plus storage and energy independence. And the fact that people, had to pay like $10 a month for the system, only underscored it. And there's one other thing. that is really important about this is that Puerto Rico began what is known as a virtual power plant. And what that means is all of these homes that had solar plus batteries could be linked together to create resilience on the system. So the more homes with batteries that you had on the system, the more resilient the system could actually be overall, and people could be compensated for giving power back to the grid, energy back to the grid in times when the grid is down. And that program will lose out because of it. It's another way to make the grid resilient. It's just such a backwards strategy to have done what was done.
Is there any way that these organizations that were selected to lead like the processes of installing the system, etc., can complete them? Do they have the resources, the money to do that or not?
No. Nobody had money to do this. This is why this $1 billion was so important. And it was so, as I say, there were 12,000 people who had been signed up by the solar ambassadors, who'd been vetted, and some whose installations had begun, where the money was yanked. For poor people, nobody has money to be able to do the installations of batteries and rooftop solar. It's ridiculous to think that individuals can do that. I mean, other individuals who have more money, they can continue to, of course, get solar and storage, and they should. But for poor people, this was a lifeline. And so this is why it's so hard to hear what has happened.
Puerto Rico has one of the highest electric rates in the nation. How these programs help the residents of the island to lower costs?
Yeah, I mean, their fuel came from the sun, so it was free, and the equipment was installed, and the only thing that they had to pay was connectivity to the grid, which was a $10 fee, and that was it. So previously, people who were very poor were paying high. I mean, obviously there was subsidies for people who were very, very poor, but nonetheless, it was a much more expensive bill that people received than what they received under Programa Acceso Solar, and we had another component of this, which was the Programa de Comunidades Resilientes, and that too was canceled, and that would have given multifamily homes, multifamily dwellings, as well as medical centers and community medical facilities, the ability to have rooftop solar and storage in case of an emergency. That is hugely important too. Totally wiped out.
I'm going to move to the arguments of the Trump administration to cancel these programs. In a cabinet meeting with Trump almost a year ago, I will say 10 months ago, Chris Wright said that the Biden administration wanted to use Puerto Rico as a poster child. They argue, in other words, that the position of the Biden administration was a political one and not one focused on the well-being of the Puerto Rican people. He also said that under the administration, you have millions of dollars to help Puerto Rico and you didn't spend it. I guess he was referring to the money for the electric grid. But what do you have to say in response to that argument of Wright?
Well, first of all, this is Puerto Rico's goal of getting to 100% clean energy. And the goal of doing rooftop solar to give people energy independence came from Puerto Rico. So Puerto Ricans, that was critical. We designed this, and we came with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to the island to really reinforce that this is by and for Puerto Ricans. So to suggest that this was a poster child for for the Biden administration, et cetera, Puerto Rico wanted to be the poster child for solar. It's by law. That's what Puerto Ricans wanted. We wanted to help facilitate that. The notion that the unspent money, that is, there's $10 billion that is unspent by FEMA, and trying to get the ridiculous backlog through. I mean, we got some of that backlog through. It was, I don't know, 15, 16 billion. Now it's down to somewhere around 10. But they're two different, I mean, it's really important. These are two different programs. The FEMA money is for the grid, the poles, the transmission, the generation. The money for rooftop solar was to be complementary, but really to help the most vulnerable.
Now I'm going to quote an email from the DOE regarding the redirection of the funding from the renewable programs to the electric grid. And says, read like as follows. The former administration pursued 100% renewable future, which led to intermittent generation deployment policies that have raised energy costs for Puerto Rican families and businesses, threatening the reliability of the energy system and undermine national security. The rapid widespread deployment of rooftop solar has created fluctuations in Puerto Rico grid, leading to unacceptable instability and fragility. What do you have to say? Because that's the only information that we have basically from the DOE, because they haven't spoke.
Yeah, the DOE lately has been promulgating this notion that renewables make the grid more expensive, when that is just not true. Every study shows that the more renewables that you have, because the fuel is free, the costs come down. They obviously, this is an administration that is very focused on fossil fuels. They want the island to have more gas generation, coal generation, et cetera. That's not, from my understanding, having been there so many times and looking at the law, that's not what Puerto Ricans had decided for themselves. They wanted to have a clean energy future, and that future is less expensive, not more expensive. And certainly this rooftop solar program was designed to bring down costs for vulnerable people.
I want to be clear about something.
And let me just say one other thing, is that it's not just solar, because what they say, oh, it's intermittent, et cetera. But these all had batteries. The batteries make it firm power. And so that's another frustrating element of the argument.
I want to be clear about something, because it's not a lie. It's true that there is a generation deficit in Puerto Rico. There's a generation problem in Puerto Rico. But my question in that direction will be, up to what point is necessary the natural gas to solve that problem?
Yeah,
Because,
I mean, natural gas.
Because the local government insisted, for example, that during the last summer in Puerto Rico, there were not massive blackouts because of the increase of power generation. Do you agree with that notion? What is your position regarding natural gas right now in Puerto Rico?
Well, yeah, I will say this, that natural gas can be a bridge, but our PR-100 study showed that Puerto Rico could do this 100% on solar, and maybe some wind too. But there is definitely a way to be able to have Puerto Rico be 100% renewable. However, I understand that people want the comfort of knowing that natural gas is there in times of crisis. I will say that the amount and the duration of outages in the last year has gone up. The duration has gone up 16%. The outages have gone up 3%. So I'm not sure that argument really applies. So much of the outages are due to poor transmission and distribution wires, because of course of vegetation growing over the wires, et cetera. You've been there, you've seen all of the ridiculous number of wires on the old poles that were put up in the 50s, and the generation on Puerto Rico right now, the plants are way past what is industry standard for the amount of time a generation facility should be on board. So we need to add more generation. It should be clean generation pursuant to Puerto Rico's own goals. It can be 100%, and the studies have shown that.
Okay. Many people argue that in order to have an efficient renewable system, you need to have a stable grid, right? But totally what true. Is the midpoint in that discussion?
What is the midpoint?
The midpoint, the balance in that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have a grid. You could do it without a grid, but it's important to have a grid just for certainty, to have that certainty that everybody's connected, and especially for places like businesses who may not have enough rooftop to be able to power their own independent operations. So you need to have a grid to be able to move power across the island. But you can have a grid and you can have rooftop solar, and they can work together. And that's what we had planned for Puerto Rico. So it's not just one or the other. It is really both.
You mentioned multiple times the Puerto Rico 100 or PR-100 study. How far is Puerto Rico now from the 100% goal as a result of the Trump policies backed by the local government?
Yeah, I mean, they're far from it now. It was going to take, the goal is to get to 100% by 2050. Obviously, we got 24 years left to be able to do that, and it's definitely doable. But this is setting that goal back years, unfortunately. And, it doesn't mean that it can't be undone, doesn't mean that we can't pick up where we left off in 2030, but in the meantime, you've got 4 years of vulnerable people and potential hurricanes. It's not like the hurricanes are slowing down. Obviously, climate change is accelerating all of that. So, because you had one decent hurricane season doesn't mean that it's over,
And what do you think when you learned that the DOE removed from the webpage the information about the PR-100? How this affect the access of the people to the public information, basically?
Yeah, it's very, it's confusing to me. I don't know why you would take down the information from the labs that are under the Department of Energy, who spent a couple of years working on this and had many community meetings about that as well. But removing it's just illogical. It is illogical. And it's, I know they've taken down all references to climate change on the website, and they've totally removed the things that were related to, renewable energy, and stuff like that, and ESG and all of that. But it's just, it's really confusing for a party, a political party that when we were in office, we're really pushing all of the above kinds of energy, which included renewables. It included fossil fuels, but they were also pushing for renewables. And now all of that is gone. It's just very confusing.
For those who don't know, can you explain what PR-100 is and how valuable is to set, I would say, the route to renewable energy in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, so when the law was passed that said Puerto Rico should go to 100% clean by 2050, we brought in the labs. We brought in 3 labs to be able to actually map the island and see whether it was possible to be able to get there. Now, of course, there was an earlier goal. I want to say 40% renewable by I can't remember what it was, 2030 or 2020 something, and that was not achievable at the.
I think it was 40%. I think it was 40.
It was 40%, yes, and that by the timeline, but it was definitely doable by 2050. And so showing the roadmap of where were the communities that were most vulnerable, that were without power for the longest period of time after hurricanes, that really were the first hit, right? Mapping that out and being able to say, and then layering on top, where are the renewable assets, meaning the places where you could do both rooftop on buildings and on homes, but also utility scale renewable energy. Where is that best? And what is the mix of energy inputs? So do you have how much of that should be offshore wind? How much of that should be solar? How much of that is batteries? How much? That was all done through the PR-100 study. And again, with input after a year and a half of community meetings with leaders who were helping to inform the study. And so the fact that all of that work is now inaccessible is very frustrating.
I know it's a huge report, but for you, what is the most important part or conclusion of that study?
The most important part is, yes, we can. Sí se puede. We can really do this by 2050. It's not just a pipe dream, that it is a rational, and that there's a rational step-by-step roadmap to be able to get there.
When you were the secretary of the DOE, you questioned the work that LUMA was doing. You weren't satisfied with their performance. Right now, what is your position about the LUMA's performance in Puerto Rico? Does the company fulfill what they promised? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, so then Juan Sacco, who was brought in a couple of years ago to be able to accelerate all of this, and we had meetings with LUMA and with the state, with Puerto Rican government and with all of the entities that were FEMA, et cetera, to try to prioritize projects and move them forward. It is very vast, the amount of repair that has to happen on the grid still. So no one can be satisfied with the progress until people can be and until at least Puerto Rico's outages are on par with the mainland. And unless that happens, you cannot be satisfied. And so lighting a fire under LUMA to move more quickly, releasing more of those FEMA dollars to push that forward was everything we were pushing on. And it's, the frustration with the grid is exemplified by the Super Bowl performance of Bad Bunny, obviously. Nobody can be satisfied.
But how much time will LUMA need to speed this up? Because it seems that the company couldn't even deal with the federal funding. There's so many money there, and it's not moving. That's the reality.
Yeah, it is. What's enormously frustrating is the FEMA process is extremely cumbersome. The LUMA process is cumbersome, and the two together really created bottlenecks that one would hope you could bust through. And so this is why every other month I was down there with a meeting of the group saying, here's what we put on the list. Where are we at? How many substations have been repaired? How many lines have been repaired? How much vegetation has been cut back so that you could hold people accountable? And so we did move billions of dollars on the grid, but I don't know. I can't speak to what's happening right now. And it needs to continue to be streamlined.
What do you think about the lawsuit presented by the Gonzalez administration to cancel LUMA's contract?
Well, I hope that they have an alternative planned. I'm assuming that they wouldn't be doing that unless there's an alternative. Listen, I'm in favor of whatever it takes to get the grid to work. So if it's not LUMA, they better have somebody good in line to be able to make it happen.
But will that be the solution to the problem, or the what's the word? Stagnancy of LUMA. How can we solve this more easily? Or not?
There has to be. The problem has to be addressed both at LUMA and at FEMA to be able to move this stuff forward. And that's true with permitting. There's, previous governor signed permitting streamlining. I don't know what this governor has done, but permitting and the historical designations and the environmental concerns and fish and wildlife. There's all of these pieces. They have to be streamlined in order to get the money out and the grid repaired. And so all of it has to happen. You can't just point the finger at one. It is really a puzzle.
Bueno, ahí escucharon ustedes a la exsecretaria del Departamento de Energía, Jennifer Granholm, quien dio detalle, ¿verdad?, del estatus de la cancelación de los proyectos bajo el Fondo de Resiliencia Energética de Puerto Rico, aprobado en el Congreso y cancelado bajo la Administración Trump. Ha dado explicación, ¿verdad?, de lo que hicieron durante la administración, de lo que se está haciendo ahora y de las implicaciones de estas decisiones. Así que, Exsecretary, thank you very much for your information, for your knowledge, and for being available for El Diario.
Of course. Thank you so much.